a composer. I do sometimes film music. I compose for ballet, I compose songs, commercials, anything which is music, anything. I'm born in Beirut a long time ago. I was in a boarding school at the age of 4, at the Jesuit school, until the age of 14. And I'm born in a family where there's no musician, no artist whatsoever. I knew that I just wanted to learn music and to read as much as possible. So reading became to me the most important thing. So I ate a lot of music during these years. And at the same time, when I was on holiday, I would listen also to pop songs, to jazz, if it was possible, because in Beirut there was not so much jazz, only one show on the radio, and take down what I was listening. I still remember that the first LP I took down was Rubber Soul by the Beatles. And it was very difficult because I had to listen to the bass separately, to the drums, and take down all this. Then it was Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? Then it was John Coltrane, Charlie Mingus. I did a lot of takedowns, as much as I read classical music from Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, Schumann. And at the age of 16, I discovered Debussy, Ravel. And I started learning them, playing piano and, reading all the time, reading. Then my teacher died when I was 14 years old. He used to play organ in the cathedral in Beirut. So I was given the key of the organ and I was allowed to play organ. Between the organ, jazz, pop music, reading, I started composing without knowing anything about harmony, counterpoint. But eventually I noticed that I have learned harmony and counterpoint by reading really assiduously all these composers. At the age of 18, during the holiday, I met a Brazilian guy. His name is Augusto Marzagal. And he said, do you want to represent Lebanon to the festival of Maracanã in Brazil, Maracanãzinho? I said, but I'm not a singer. He said, we'll find a singer. I'm not a composer, I don't know how to do songs. He said, just do a tune and we'll find a lyricist. And this is how I found myself in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, for 15 days. I found myself so happy that I decided to stay, and I stayed 2 years. But in order to make a living, I had to find a job. So I gathered 2-3 people with me. We did a band, and I would play every night in a club called Number One, Rua Maria Quitéria in Ipanema. From Beirut to Brazil to Paris, and I came to Paris and I stayed in Paris. And I met 2 brothers called the Costa Brothers, and we did together songs which we would sing all together in English. We found a lyricist in English. And the name of the album was Costa Yared Costa. And someone had to write the orchestrations. And so at the time, the only thing I knew about orchestration was probably Daphnis et Chloé, Ravel, Jeu, Debussy, L'Enfant et les Sortilèges. I mean, my book here is completely old, it's completely teared, so I so much looked at that. And so I said, okay, I'll write the orchestration. And when I did these sessions, musicians started to talk between them, saying there's a great orchestrator in Paris. And so came to me a lot of pop singers in France, like Johnny Hallyday, Charles Aznavour, Gilbert Bécaud, said, I want you to orchestrate my time. And until now, I don't know how I did this, because I didn't know how to orchestrate really. And I learned orchestration thanks to these pop stars. I was also asked to do commercials, which I found very interesting, because in 15 seconds or 30 seconds, you need to find a nice tune, you need to orchestrate it properly to the image or just to a radio publicity. I found everything interesting as long as it was about music. Then, in 1978, after 6 years of orchestration, I said, okay, now I'm going to stop because this is not what I want. What I want, and I always wanted this, learn harmony, counterpoint, fugue. I wanted to do that. So I've stopped everything and I took 2 sabbatic years. And I did this during 2 years, assiduously, just that. And I found out that really I didn't know anything about music. I like challenging the ear, because the ear is a bad judge. I discovered this when I studied counterpoint. I was so used to do things by ear. Even orchestration, I used to do it by ear. So these 2 years have been like probably the most important discovery in my life. I had the chance to meet Jean-Luc Godard through Françoise Hardy, whom I have orchestrated her songs, I produced her albums, etc. And Jean-Luc Godard called me for a film called in French, Sauf qui peut la vie. And this was my first meeting with a film director. At this time, and until probably 20 years ago, I really had a lack of knowledge of cinema. Because imagine that I was just starving for music and nothing was more important for me than music. So when I met Jean-Luc Godard, I didn't know who was this guy. I didn't know cinema. I just saw when I was a kid, I remember this, I saw two films. One called Marnie and another one called The Fall of the Roman Empire. And I do remember that The Fall of the Roman Empire starts with a fugue. When I met Jean-Luc Godard, he started telling me the story of his film. He said, it's a story about this and that, etc. No? I said, can I see some images? He said, you don't need that. No, I don't want to show you images. This is the story. I want you to take 8 bars from the overture of the second act of Ponchielli La Gioconda. Play around those 8 bars until the end, where we'll play this overture. And since I was just finishing Counterpoint, I said, but this is a great opportunity to use everything I've learned, how not to quote a theme, but to work around it. It's part of my studies. So the theme was this. That's it, with accompaniment, etc. So I took this theme, I remember, and I started dividing it into cells, and then reversing it, and then changing the basses, variating, etc. But instead of having an orchestra, I decided to work only with synthesizer, because I loved these new instruments. And at the time, it was small synthesizer like the Minimoog, the Pro One, and things like that. And I wrote all the music as if I was writing for an orchestra. And Jean-Luc Godard came, I was sitting in the studio. Listen, listen, listen. He didn't say anything. At the end, when we mixed the music, he took the music and he edited his film on the music. And I discovered, all of a sudden, a guy who is very, not only creative, but is very clever with music. And when I was invited in Cannes to see the film, I discovered something that, you know, a new way of working for me, a new way of composing and creating. After that, time has passed. I did many films, and one day, it was in the 90s, I received a phone call from an advertising company. We were working with a director called Anthony Minghella. We're doing a publicity for a mobile phone. It was the very first mobile phone. It was big like that. I went to London, and when I arrived, it was a big room with a lot of people. You know how publicity goes there, you have the director, artistic director, the client and all this. And among them, there was a kind of happy face like a Buddha looking at me with bright eyes and so charming smile. It was Anthony. We met and he said, I would really love to work with you. And it was a treat to work with him. I did the music and then we became friends, before becoming soulmates later. And he was at the time preparing a film called The English Patient. He called me and he said, I have a project, but I'm not sure that you'll be hired. He came with the project and he told me about the project. Would you write a main theme now that I told you the story and all that? I give you 4 hints. Puccini, Johann Sebastian Bach, Middle East, Arab music. And the 4th was a recording he found of Marta Sebastian of a song which is supposed to be Hungarian, but also Turkish, called Serelem. I said, why Puccini? He said, Puccini because the elegance of the harmony, the beauty and originality of all his tunes. And I agreed with him because I love Puccini. And then he said Johann Sebastian Bach because there's a place in the film where they play a piece from Bach. So he said, I know you love Bach, so do I, so let's go also to Bach. And Middle East, you are from there, so I want you to bring something Oriental in this music. And I started writing the first part of the theme. But then I was stuck how to go further and to open up to something more lyrical and romantic. It took me a long while, probably 2 months, to find the ouverture of the film, which was the main theme. I called Anthony, he came back to Brittany, I played for him the theme. He said, okay, I'm gonna call the producer and ask him to invite you to San Francisco and you're gonna play this theme for him. And this is what happened. And I remember when he introduced me to Saul Zaentz didn't want to work with me. He had many other names for this project. And I was on my own on the stage and I would start saying, it would start by big basses singing like that. Oh, like that. And I would mock up everything with my mouth. And then I start playing and saying, this is a cor anglais, and this is where come the string, etc. At the end, Saul Zaentz say, okay, you're hired. And then I met, without meeting him personally, I met Walter Murch through my sendings and his response, etc. I didn't know Walter Murch, I didn't know his films. I learned after all the films he not only edited but mixed also. And when I had the chance to meet him personally, I was just, I adored him, yeah. So before that, I used to live in this island, Monk Island, so the mainland was 5 minutes by boat. And they started the process of editing, and they would send me a video with 2 or 3 scenes or the cut, but never the whole film. I would receive this, and I would do a demo on the scene. Then I would call a courier who would send it to San Francisco. I started sending demos, and I would receive my demo on the images, but my demo was cut by Walter Murch for some reason which I wanted to understand. Then I would call Anthony and Walter, and Anthony would explain on behalf of Walter why the music doesn't work here. All of this has lasted 6 months, back and forth. But there was a big problem, and this problem I had it with Anthony, not with Walter. Because there's a scene in the film where Juliette Binoche is swinging, you know, on the rope in the church. I would send something, and Anthony would send me a fax, it doesn't work. And then call me, said, it doesn't work, I want you to lift her, I want you to swing her. I would redo and send it again, and Anthony said, no, I said, but it is swinging her, it is lifting her, listen again. Of course, my demos were not like they are now. I mean, now you can really give all these dynamics and add strings and mandolin, because there is mandolins in the church. I didn't have good samples of mandolin, so it sounded very like, you know, like something very peculiar playing like that. The second one, which took me a lot of time, and Walter had this idea since the beginning to use the aria of the Goldberg variation of Bach in a scene where the patient is laying, of course, in his bed and reading the book of Herodotus. But then they discovered through the process of editing that they cannot use the aria over and over because the scene was too long and it didn't work really to use the reprise and all that. And then I was commissioned in a way. I had a mission to write a piece to replace the aria, a kind of homage to Bach. To me, I think it was the most difficult thing in the world, because I wrote a prelude for piano or for whatever, 3 voices. I think it took me 2 months to write this, slowly, bar after bar. I started by looking again at the score of all the sonatas and partitas for violin solo, Bach. And this was probably my inspiration to write this piece, although it's harmonized, I mean, it's 3 voices. When I wrote this piece first, it was not for piano, it was for violin solo. It's after that that I harmonized it in 3 voices.
Anna.
Kip.
And when Walter received it, you know, Walter never expresses enthusiasm. He just said, it's perfectly right. Just that. It was to me a great compliment. And from this piece of music, I have used some cells of the theme of that, of course, for the church. With the pizzicato and the mandolin plays here with the strings. At the end of the work, I was invited to watch the film for the first time in New York. And I was amazed by the work of Walter, which I was not aware of. For instance, in the end credits, he has mixed in such a beautiful way, I mean, he's a musician also, he has mixed Serelem improvisation of Martha Sébastien on this. And it goes like this together, and you feel that it has been written. But I didn't write this. It's just he, Walter Murch, who built this cohesion between my piece and an improvisation by Martha Sébastien during the studio. The first theme I wrote in order to be hired, on the advice of Anthony, and after speaking with him about what he really hears for this main theme, was the theme of the desert, which is going into the theme of love. So it starts with a cor anglais solo. There's only a cor anglais, and there is also an oriental instrument, which is in the score called qanun. And this is what gives really the kind of oriental feel, which we'll hear at the end of the theme, and at the beginning with the cor anglais, just a few notes. So it starts with the cor anglais. Strings. Those themes give so much opportunity to vary and to reorchestrate that I think it was really the core of the music for this film. And after The English Patient, I mean, we had many collaborations, Anthony and I. And when I learned, it was in 2008, he passed away, I stopped film music during a year. I was on a project and I had to say, I'm sorry, I will step down, yeah, because I can't. It's because with Anthony, it was not only film composing, it was so many other things together, you know. We would listen to the same thing together. We had the same taste in many different domains, would be literature or painting or music, whatever. And we would also do songs. We did songs together. I mean, Lullaby for Cain is a song written, lyrics by Anthony, and we did also for Cold Mountain a song which has been demoed by James Taylor, but unfortunately has not been released on the film. And Anthony wrote the lyrics. And he loved the Beatles as much as I did, because the Beatles are part of my culture, as much as Bach. Usually I don't come in this room before I've composed in the other room where I have no computers, nothing electronic. There I do my work of composition and I write it down on all my notebooks here. I do my demos here in this place after having composed, and I start orchestrating each scene. I play every single section. I use very much the pedal volume because I don't want to do something flat, so there are some dynamics in the things I do. Then when I record it with an orchestra, with a proper orchestra, I do my recording in London, always. And I work with contracted musicians. I have always my principals, my leader. I like when it's alive, if it's not absolutely perfect, because perfection is the enemy of emotion, of a lot of things. And I always work in London because I'm amazed sometimes, I have very difficult sometimes orchestration to play. It's not easy. And these guys, they arrive joking at 10 to 10, discussing and all that. At 10 exactly, everybody is there, tuned, ready to start. And sometimes the very first take, they read immediately. The very first take is fantastic. And nowhere in the world, I could find the same cohesion. It's one for all. They are very united between them. They play, they listen to each other. And at the same time, they know about film music work. They give, and at the end of the day, I'm so happy. I wish I could record a symphony with them, or an orchestral piece with the same people. When I have a deadline, I have to, in some way, to abdicate, to say, okay, now stop, we have to deliver. But once the deadline is gone and I have no film, no project, nothing, I keep composing all the time. And I'm really very lucky to be able to do something I love and to make a living from it. Bless destiny who allowed me all this.